Cool, awesome. Thank you guys. So I will get started while that is getting us set up here. My name is Ann Meeker. For the past few years, I've worked as the Director of Constituent Services for Congressman Seth Moulton up on the North Shore. Do I know any constituents? Anyone from the 6th District? Yes. All right, hopefully we're making you proud. So what I do for Congressman Seth Moulton, forward a little. Thank you. So what I do is, like I said, constituent services. So when someone like my good friend Roger here from Ipswich calls their congressman because they are having a problem with a federal agency, they get me. And so our job as on the constituent services team is to work with members of our community to try to resolve the issues they're having with the federal government. The idea being that we are gathering data on where the most common problems our constituents are seeing with the federal government so that we can bring those changes to legislation or to problem solving. So a couple years ago, I was the Social Security caseworker, and one of the most common things I was hearing from constituents was, I just got a letter saying I'm affected by the Windfall Elimination provision. I've never heard of this, I don't think it applies to me, this is crazy, I don't understand it. As Matt alluded to, the Windfall Elimination provision is a Social Security law that says if you worked in the public sector, so if you worked and you paid into Social Security, and you also worked for a state and local government, so you have a pension that you did not pay Social Security taxes on, your Social Security retirement benefits when you get to retirement will be reduced. In some cases, it's by up to half. So it can be a huge surprise for people when they run into this and they go to retire and their benefits are a lot less than they were expecting. So the issue I was seeing as a caseworker were a couple. So the formula is really complex. So it's really difficult for folks to understand and have the information they need to figure out how their benefits are calculated, which really hampers their ability to advocate for themselves if they think there's a problem. The other part is that information is distributed on multiple websites for Social Security. So again, as a caseworker, I'm trying to help people find the pieces of this formula, and we're having to search all these different places. There was information that I couldn't even find on Social Security's website. I had to go to the Library of Congress to help me understand it. And like I said, there's poor advance notification. So when people are running into this, they're already not in their best shape. A lot of times it's people who, like I said, had this terrible financial surprise. So they took out a mortgage thinking that they could pay for it in their retirement on one benefit level and then realize that that's not actually what's going to happen. This affects actually a couple million people. So not every state has their state and local retirement funds set up so that they don't pay Social Security taxes, but 6 or 8 states, almost everyone who works for state and local government will be affected by this, and for other states it's partial. So there are probably a couple million people out there affected by this. So, with that, I went to Code for Boston and said, hey, I'm a caseworker, and every time someone comes to my office and says I'm affected by Windfall, again, I've done this work, I've figured out the formula, but whenever I'm trying to explain it, it takes me 45 minutes. Is there a way that you guys can help me?
And so in order to sort of work on this challenge, we created a sort of JavaScript spreadsheet in this platform called Observable. It uses the observable pattern, if you're a software developer familiar with that, and basically allows you to, you can see the little controls at the bottom. We programmed in a lot, we replicated a lot of the formulas that Social Security made available on their website. It also talked to the Congressional Research Service through Ann, and we're able to kind of replicate what the manual calculations show for many individual people. And ultimately, once we were satisfied with that sort of JavaScript spreadsheet application, was sort of giving us the right answers on a consistent basis for people's entire history from their work history throughout their working life. We also worked on the user experience into a mobile app, not a mobile app, but a tablet-oriented single-page web app. And I'll just go into that in a second here. Do you want to talk a little more about the process?
Yeah, sure. So this has really been a fun process for me. So again, harking back to Matt again, I have zero tech experience. I don't know anything, didn't have a smartphone until I was 22. And so just as someone who's working with our legislative team in Congress, like being able to kind of get to know the Code for Boston team and Code for Boston community has really taught us a lot about this world and what can we be doing in Congress to really kind of support the folks that we're working with here. think about this more broadly. Also, some of the infrastructure of a congressional office really made sense for this work. So one thing we did was user testing at town halls, where we already had an audience of people who mostly fit our demographic. So that's been a really fun development process over the past year.
Excellent. Thanks so much. So this is the app as it's made. Again, it distills away a lot of those other calculations that are sort of important, but not essential to understand your situation. And so the first thing you do is you enter your birth date. This is pre-programmed in for a reasonable birth date. Someone that's retiring, maybe this could retire in the next year or two. And then it calculates the retirement age and when the year that they would retire, they're recommended to retire in to collect the maximum amount that they can get. And then it asks you a series of questions about your career. So there's two different ways that you can you might have this information. The best way is to get a file directly from Social Security, and so you can get that from socialsecurity.com. And we're just going to quickly put it in that way. But you can also manually enter your document, your earnings history. So I've just entered in some an example document, example working history. So this is how much this example person has made each year of their life, from when they turned 16 or whatever until they're retired. And we'll just walk them through this question. Do you want to talk a little for a moment?
Sure, I think we're close to time. I'll keep it very brief. So basically, one of the hardest parts of this was trying to figure out how do we make this formula intelligible to people who aren't familiar with it. So through a lot of user testing, a lot of trial and error, we figured out this is the simplest way to determine if someone is affected by windfall elimination provision. We were asking really complicated questions about, do you work in covered employment versus non-covered employment? How do we tell you what is covered employment? And then had a flash of inspiration 9 months into the process.
And so people that are affected, you will press this and can then enter how much they're receiving from the government pension, $1,500 a month. And then it will, at the end, say how much you make, you will expect it to get given that information. And it also warns you, and you can investigate what it might mean to retire a little bit earlier or a little later. And then you can print the results to see the detailed calculations from the calculator that we have internally sort of come up with for you.
Awesome. So I think that's our demo. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
And it's live at ssacalculator.org, but there's a disclaimer at the top.
Yeah, what's up?
How do you ensure that all this information stays secure? Because they're giving you a lot of their personal information.
Sure, so it's actually not that much personal information. So it's only your earnings record, which can't really be used to trace your identity. It's your earnings record and your birth date. But Dad can probably speak more to this, but it's not stored after the session ends.
It's just a client-side application, and we don't store anything, so it goes away as soon as you close the tab.
So what happens when, first, is it possible that that calculation is wrong in any case? And if it does, like what happens if someone is expecting some benefit and get less later?
Sure, so in there, so if we go through the full post results, we do have here's some common questions, and one of those is what's going wrong if this doesn't match what Social Security is telling me. So that's part of why we put so much work into the print my results page, because that breaks down each step of the formula. So someone could bring in that print my results page to their Social Security field office and say, hey, from my perspective, my earnings record is this, which means my average index monthly earnings is this. For my calculations, I have 20 years of substantial gainful employment, which is Social Security's threshold for determining if a year counts. I plan to retire at this date, my full retirement age is this much. Where are your records different? So that someone can try to advocate for themselves and figure out what went wrong. In terms of whether or not the formula is accurate, we have tested it against quite a bit of user data, and it's working accurately for us right now. It gets difficult the further out someone is from retirement. One of the things we really wanted this to do is help people who are already retired and help people who are planning to retire predict their benefits. So the further someone comes to us away from retirement, the less accurate the formula gets, but we're still ironing out some kinks there.
Thanks, everyone. I think we're out of time, sorry. But feel free to follow up with us after.
Okay.